What's up, guys? Mark back here. So I started getting some comments and stuff on the video that I just released. And it was over the Panasonic GH5, or not the GH5, the G85, and the Sony A6300, and I had the Sigma 30mm f1.4 on there. So let me pull up. There was a couple of different questions. I want to try and answer them so that I can answer them for everybody. My face looks really overexposed. I'm not really sure why that is. Anyway, I don't think it really matters at this point. But yeah, so I wanted to test these two cameras out because the G85 is just 110% stock. Like, there's no special lens on here or anything. It's kind of sort of new. It's a micro four thirds sensor. But the Sonys, both the A6300 and the A6500, are top-notch performers. Okay, in low light, they have absolutely no problem going up to 6400, 12,000 ISO, and they don't blink. Like, they are that good in low light. And I've had nothing but good luck with them. So for me to go and just compare it, the G85 with its micro four thirds sensor is not supposed to do that well. And for the fact that it has in-body image stabilization and lens stabilization, you've got two combined different forms of stabilization. This has nada. Now, I do have lenses for this camera that are stabilized. I've got the 50mm, and I think which one? I've got a couple of them. So I could have used those. But this is a f1.4. It's probably, hey man, what's going on, Sully? This is probably one of the best lenses on the market today for the Sony APS-C cameras. And that's just a fact. It's like that good. It's got the most transmission of light. So what I did, just to be 100% clear, I don't always think that the methodology comes through as good on an edited video, because I'm just trying to make it bite-sized enough that people will watch it, get the basic gist of what I'm doing. But I've always got someone out there that really wants to analyze my test and my methodology, which is fine. I think that's how we grow and figure out what's going to work out best for us. But the G85, hey, what's going on, photography junkie? But the G85 is, first of all, micro four thirds sensor, so it's got a smaller sensor right out of the gate. This has got a larger sensor right out of the gate. This has the G85 has a kit lens on it. Okay, it's a variable aperture kit lens at that. I think it's a 3.5 to 5.6 or something. I don't think it says. Oh, it says here on the front. Yeah, 3.5 to 5.6. So basic standard variable aperture style lens. Nothing wild, nothing crazy. Pretty standard. This is the best, the fastest, the brightest lens that anyone has ever made for Sony's cameras. It does even better than Sony's very own 50mm f1.8. So that's what I wanted to test out. I wanted to see what this amazing low light performing camera can do, and just shove that shutter speed down as low as I possibly could. I mean, not as low as I possibly could. I guess I could a lot lower than that. But, a fifth of a second is pretty ridiculous handheld, first of all. Second of all, it's pretty ridiculous in low light. So I had one guy, who was it? Frank Waz, said, why would you do handheld if you're comparing low light? Just because I'd like to see what it can do. Like, sometimes you just want to see what something is capable of. Sometimes you just have to know, I guess. And I did. I wanted to know. I mean, this is a $1,000 camera with built-in image stabilization, and this lens is a kit lens, and it has lens stabilization. And this whole thing is $1,000. I'd have to get rid of the lens right off the get. This by itself is $1,000. No lens. No good lens, not even a kit lens, $1,000. Okay? So already I'm saving money, but I have a smaller sensor on this. So you guys have to tell me how a smaller sensor camera, that costs less and yet you get more, does better in low light, handheld, no sticks, no tripod, no monopod, no form of stabilization, literally sitting there hand holding the camera. How does that beat the Sony? Okay, for whatever reason, I kind of feel like deja vu here. This is kind of the thing that I was working on back when I was contemplating going back or leaving Nikon at the time and going over to Sony in the first place. It's like when someone comes out with something that is so big dick amazing, you almost have to kind of go, I cannot believe that they're able to do that level of awesome for $1,000. I said the exact same thing, when the Sony A6000 first came out. Here I was spending $2,000-$3,000 on Nikon bodies, and then I was spending, just an inordinate amount of money on Nikon lenses and $400, $500, $600 on Nikon flashes. And then the Sony A6000 comes out, and I mean, it just changed everything for me. Not only was I able to get as good, if not better, shots with the Sony, but it was relatively a solid performer. I still have the A6000 in there, and I beat the crap out of that camera. Literally beat the crap out. I've dropped it several times, and it's still going. I mean, it's a plasticky body. It's not weather sealed. So you have those conversations with yourself. You have a lot of other photographers out there that want to basically make you feel like a turd because you bought some sort of lower price gear. But when these cameras start doing this good at these price points with other things in the same sort of price bracket that don't do it or are incapable or they don't do it as well, you start asking yourself, how brand loyal can you honestly be? I can't be brand loyal. I mean, I love Sony because they do manage to pack a lot of tech into their cameras. There's just no doubt about it. But they seriously lack in the APS-C lens department, and that sucks because I want the smaller cameras. I want the lighter weight. I absolutely positively do not want to carry around some massive 5-pound camera body. It's just that's not me anymore. If someone told me that all I was allowed to shoot on for the rest of my life, I'd probably go, well, all right, I guess. But I wouldn't want to. If I have a choice, I would opt for the smaller, lighter camera. Granted, it's cheaper, and that's a big plus. But the problem is that without good, solid lens lineups, Sony's not going to stay on top for very long. Not when Panasonic is doing shit like this. This is a whole different ballgame. It is a cheaper system with a smaller sensor, shittier lens, variable aperture, and it was able to do what this was not. The best lens on the planet, native E-mount lens, and it couldn't hold that shot steady. Not like the Panasonic could. So I'm not saying that it's an apples to apples comparison. I was giving you, the viewers, a look at what two different cameras from two different systems using two different size sensors. This should not have won. This should not have beat the Sony with this lens on there. It just shouldn't have. Granted, I could have upped the settings, or I could have upped my shutter speed, increased the ISO, had less noise, the whole thing. But I wanted to just see what this camera could do. I wanted it to basically pick the settings. The only thing that I really picked was the shutter speed. I knew that I wanted it to be relatively slow. I wanted it to be somewhere in that, 8 second, 5 second, 4 second, 3 second range, somewhere in there. And I just wanted to see. So everything else, this is a variable aperture lens. So as I zoomed in to kind of frame in the fireplace, I let it go ahead and decide for me, what the aperture was going to be, and it landed on 4.5. So I matched that setting. I matched the 4.5 aperture on the Sony, and I picked the exact same shutter speed on the Sony, and then I let the ISO, I did auto ISO and let it pick whatever it was going to get. So obviously with the larger sensor, the ISO difference was going to be lower. But everyone knows, anyone that knows, or has used this camera knows that the A6300, the A6500 are autofocus beasts. These things grab focus and will not let go. So I had one guy suggest, he goes, he said, the Sony looks like it's out of focus. I know. That's how bad it was. It's not because I missed focus. I was sitting still at 4 feet away, and I locked focus, and then half press locked focus, and then slowly took that shot just as easy and as lightly as I possibly could to make sure I introduced as little shake into the image as I possibly could, and the Panasonic still beat it. So it shouldn't have. Quite frankly, it should not have beat. So that was my test. That's the reason I wanted to do it. These are not the same. These cameras shouldn't, they're not in the same class. This is APS-C and this is micro four thirds. And for a micro four thirds with a shitty variable aperture zoom lens should not be beating the Sony A6300 with a native 1.4. It's the best APS-C lens that they make for this camera. And for it to beat it, it was a big surprise to me. Huge surprise to me. And, I could have done a lot of other things differently to get that shot with no shake, no blur, brighter, better contrast, better ISO performance. I could have done a lot of things with the Sony to make it, but I just wanted to match the settings to see what the comparison would be, what it could do. And I was seriously impressed. If I was going to be doing any low light shooting and I didn't have my sticks with me, I would pray that I had the Panasonic G85 over the Sony A6300 right now. Probably over the A6500 as well. Some people can do those tests. I didn't buy the A6500. I know that would probably be a better, more fair comparison, considering that you could have an OSS lens on there with the in-body image stabilization. But I won't know until I test it. But I don't intend on buying it. I was not that impressed with the A6500 over the A6300 when I was down in Austin, Texas. I opted just to stay with the 6300, and I will probably wait to see what they come out with next. I want them to sort of polish up whatever it is they got going on here, and I want them to make something just a little bit better. I also had Dunny Monster. He made a comment, and I'll go ahead and I'll read it to you. You guys can probably read it for yourself, but he said, interesting. However, it shouldn't come as any surprise to find that the Panasonic producing the better image. Realistically, you would want to offset the lack of any OS or optical stabilization in the Sony by simply using a higher ISO and a faster shutter speed. If you use both cameras in auto, given the low light, automatically they will select a slower shutter speed by default, which is true. And I realized that this was going to happen. That's the reason I wanted to pick the shutter speed. So that was the constant between the two. But he says, what this does illustrate to me is that Panasonic would be the better camera if you are not taking control of the camera in full manual. Also true. Clearly, the combination of in-lens and in-body stabilization within the Panasonic works very well, allowing lower ISOs to be used. This is important particularly with Micro Four Thirds, where the ISO performance is relatively poor. Very true. One of the biggest reasons why I have tried to love the Panasonics, the Micro Four Thirds systems, but I can't ever get over the fact that the low or the high ISO performance just, I mean, they just blow balls. There's no way you could get as clean of images with the Panasonics or the Olympuses or anything like that as you could with these Sonys. The Sonys are just damn good in low light. This is important, particularly with the Micro Four Thirds, where ISO performance is relatively poor. All the same, you have illustrated an important point, that of value. The Panasonic potentially allows you to get shots that you would otherwise need to spend much more to achieve with alternative systems lacking image stabilization. And I think that's sort of where it boils down, is that for the exact same price of just the body of the A6300, or you get a body and a lens with stabilization in both, and you get cleaner, more well-defined images, hand-holding it and in low light. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal for me. I'm not saying that I couldn't accomplish the same thing with the other one, given the right settings. If I wanted to take 100% control of these cameras, granted, the A6300 would probably beat the Panasonic. But just knowing that in full auto, that if the Panasonic had to drop its shutter speed down to a ridiculously low level, it could get the shot and it wouldn't be a big turd. I think that's the biggest thing that test illustrated. Real photographers, pro photographers, people that know their gear very well, they're never going to have this problem. I can assure you it's never going to happen. But doing these kind of tests illustrates just how powerful, just how useful, just how amazing that the technology that they're now starting to incorporate in almost every camera. I mean, even the iPhone that I'm using right now, I mean, it's got image stabilization now. And all of these things total up to something that means that you don't have to spend as much. You don't have to have as much gear to get the same job done. And for me, someone that is constantly looking to lower my gear, lower my costs, lower the weight, I love to go hiking and I want my gear to be light, fast, and inobtrusive. So all of those things in combination, those are big deals for me. My goals are not the same as yours. You have to find what's going to work best for you in your particular situation, depending on your workflow, how you like to do things, ergonomics. There are a million different reasons why you would pick one camera or another lens over another camera and another lens, and you just have to work that all out for yourself. I simply make these videos and just put them out there just in case someone was like, I wonder what that test would yield. So I couldn't shake it this morning. I absolutely had to get up and test it. And again, I was very, very impressed. So, I mean, for $1,000, it really is hard to beat. I have also been testing this in the vlogging arena, and it's doing quite well. So I'll be doing some more videos on the Panasonic G85 really soon. And hope you guys end up having a great weekend. Unfortunately, I had an aunt pass away, so I will be pallbearer at her funeral tomorrow. So I'm not going to be making any videos this weekend, but I will pick things back up on Monday after the fact. So anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me here on this live follow-up. I appreciate it. If you've got any more comments, please leave them down below. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe as always. At any rate, guys, thanks again. I'll see you guys later. Peace.